करके रहेंगे।
Has Prime Minister triggered new path? Are farmer fears justified? Will new laws create agri autocracy? Will benefits trickle down to poorest? Mega Agri Roundtable coming up on Newstrack.
Over the last several days, as the farmer protests have raged around the borders of the national capital, we've been hearing from politicians across the political divide. We've heard from farmers, we've heard from those who are out in the streets protesting. What we haven't had so far is a high-quality conversation which features top voices from India Inc., who are being painted as villains by some of these protesting farmers, by top agricultural economists, and by progressive farmers, for a sense of the real impact of these three new farm laws and this raucous controversy that's currently playing itself out on the streets of the national capital. I am privileged to welcome and introduce our guests for this broadcast. I want to start by introducing first and foremost Dr. Ashok Gulati, Chair Professor for Agriculture at ICRIER, one of India's best-known, most well-regarded agricultural economists. He's a Padma Shri awardee and really focuses on crop security, insurance, subsidies, sustainability, and poverty alleviation. Dr. Gulati, welcome. I want to introduce Uday Kotak, President of the Confederation of Indian Industry, Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Kotak Mahindra Bank, one of the leading lights of India Inc. And we haven't really heard so far much from the top voices of India Inc. on what they make of this controversy that's playing itself out on the farm laws, and how will they assuage the concerns of the Indian farmer. I want to introduce the Managing Director and Chairman of ITC Limited, Sanjeev Puri. Now remember, ITC is one of those corporates that's worked most extensively on the farm sector through its e-chopals, actually reaching out, dealing with farmers, and we'll understand from him the impact they've made so far and how they look at the various concerns that are being raised by farmers who are protesting. I want to welcome also Ajay Shriram, Chairman and Managing Director of DCM Shriram. And remember, the Shriram Group is hugely invested in the agricultural sector, and we'll pick up his insights on sugarcane and their future plans after these new farm laws have come in. I want to introduce also CSC Sekhar, Professor of the Institute of Economic Growth, a PhD from the Delhi School of Economics. He's been a Fulbright scholar and works very actively on agricultural markets, price formation, and rural development. So welcome to our guests. I want to go across first and foremost to Dr. Ashok Gulati. The government at this moment has come out with a set of proposed amendments which it hopes will bring the farmers to the negotiating table, will see these protests end. What are you making of the government's proposals so far, the farmers' response to them? Do you think the amendments will dilute the new reform package way too much? What are you making of the farmers being obdurate and not listening to the amendments that are being offered because they are not convinced about the utility of these amendments? You're the one voice that is cited most often in government as being a supporter of the new farm laws. What do you make of the manner in which this controversy is playing itself out in the streets? Dr. Gulati.
Well, what is happening on the streets and the roads is somewhat unfortunate. But to break the ice, these are our own people. Government has to take a step forward. Whatever misinformation or trust deficit is there, it is incumbent and duty of the government of the day to come closer to them, remove all the doubts one by one, para by para. And what is being offered is still a part of the negotiation. Hard lines on both maximalist approach doesn't work in a democratic setup. So I would say what the concessions have been made, that if some state wants to impose the same level playing field for the private sector, although this is like, you have a high cost structure and others cannot bring the cost down, it dilutes somewhat the punch of the laws, but still it is better rather than just going to the extreme of repealing those laws. So a compromise in a democratic setup is a positive approach that the government has followed so far. And I hope the agitating farmers also understand this. It's their country, and they need to understand whatever being done actually is in their medium to long-term interests.
So you're saying two things. One, that some reform is better than no reform, even if there are dilutions, and you're hoping that there will be some compromise. Mr. Uday Kotak, as the current president of India's largest industry body, what do you make of the kind of backlash we're seeing from these protesting farmers when it comes to the fears they have about India Inc. coming in, taking over their farmlands, even though the government is crying itself hoarse, saying that they won't allow that to happen. But the farmers have very real fears which are drawing them to the streets and leading this agitation to continue and prolong.
See, Rahul, I wear the hat of a banker first in this context. And over all these years, if there is one thing which has foxed me, is for the number of people in India, an Indian population involved with agriculture versus the share of agriculture in India's total income, the number of people is far too many for the size of the income. Therefore, something over all these years has not worked to increase the overall part of agricultural income as a part of total Indian income. Therefore, something needs to change. And I am a believer that finally, substance over form. And whenever we are making change, there will always be some interests who may be hurt. And that is what creates a noise. I would always support increasing of the pot of income of agriculture in India's total GDP. And from what I understand, and we have got Dr. Ashok Gulati, who has written a number of pieces on this, welcoming this. My sense is the basic purpose of any change of law has to be to increase the size of the income. And based on whatever I'm hearing on a fundamental basis, the size of the pot of agricultural income must increase, and we must do whatever it takes.
But Mr. Kotak, what you present as a very simple economic reality is what is unsettling these protesting farmers. You said we've got way too many people involved in agriculture at this time. Over a period of time, we need to find a way of moving them out of agriculture into other occupations. That is true, but that is why farmers are so rattled, because they feel that they will have no jobs, that whatever little patch of land they have will no longer be theirs, and somehow they'll be forced out of what they're doing at present. How do we reconcile what is good for the country, good economics in the long run, with the immediate anxieties of these protesting farmers?
Rahul, I am not talking about moving out of agriculture. I am talking about increasing agricultural income share in India's GDP. We must increase the share of income. And if the income share increases, per capita income of the people in agriculture increases. And that is what I am focusing on. Not shifting of jobs, but increasing the income pot in agriculture so that per capita, per farmer, the income pot goes up.
Sanjeev Puri, ITC works extensively through its chopals in the agricultural sector. One of the big thrusts is contract farming, and that is something which has got the farmers very anxious. I was looking at a report one of our correspondents filed from Patiala and Naba, where it's been a very mixed bag. There are some farmers who benefited, but others have had bad experiences because they feel that corporates, with their huge bargaining power and their desire to put their profit motive first, can hammer down costs, and over a period of time their assured income may actually start coming down, which is what is unsettling farmers. How do you respond to these concerns? Sanjeev Puri.
Well, Rahul, I think I will step back a little first, and let's look at holistically what is happening, and then in that context look at the point that you made. See, these reforms that have happened are part of a larger gamut of policy interventions that are being made to transform Indian agriculture and multiply farmer incomes. You know, as you're aware, that the old system, and as Uday said, that has not yielded some of the desired results, has not been able to solve for some of the endemic problems of raising farmer incomes, of dealing with productivity, of the dealing with huge wastages and the lack of market linkages. And we also have an increasing threat of sustainability because the natural resources are depleting. So we have certain challenges which needs to be solved. So something has to change. So what is happening now? You see, you look at the back end with the formation of FPOs, cluster-based business organizations, then Agri Infrastructure Fund. That's an opportunity to aggregate for farmers and to create scale, and therefore to be able to gain from economies of scale, to be able to negotiate better. And the other reforms that have come in, which are on the market side, are only additional instruments or additional channels of selling. So should you want to sell in a mandi, should you want to sell in an alternate buying point, which is made either by a cooperative or a retailer or a private player, or should you want to get into a contract farming arrangement? These are choices that are available for people to choose from.
No, you're saying it's a choice, but Ajay Shriram, farmers, some of them at least, are not seeing it as a choice. They see it as a slippery slope where government mandis over a period of time will become less and less effective. More trade because of preferential terms will shift to the private sector, and that will lead to the government mandis existing but not really being as effective as they are currently. They believe that the focus should really be on making the government mandi system more effective. Do you think we've gone in for too radical a reform package that maybe the reforms, if they'd been incremental, wouldn't have invited the kind of blowback that they have?
No, I think
if you ask me, Rahul, I think factually speaking, just to take a step back, this is not only a farmer agitation. This is a farmer agitation. It is an agri-trader and middleman agitation, and it is a state-linked agitation. Ultimately, what we are seeing in Punjab or Haryana is that when FCI buys rice and wheat, there are between 8 to 14% different taxes going to many people. That the fear is, over a period of time when private mandis come up, these things may go away. The good thing is the government has said in the statements made now that we will ensure that some of these will continue even in private mandis. So looking at it in a holistic point of view, I think farmers need support and farmers need options. I think this change the government is proposing, that instead of only selling in the government mandi, you have the option to sell elsewhere. You can continue selling here. The government is also assured that MSP will be maintained. So it is not really, to my mind, just a farmer-linked situation which is affected. I think the negotiations, the discussions have to take the entire chain of people who are impacted by the potential change on a 3 or 5 year horizon, which will impact a large number of people. But going from the point of view of actually giving security to farmers, my own experience in our sugar business, and today in India, there are 5 crore farming families. They all sell to either sugar factories or to good Khansari people. And there is a system, it's adopted, money is paid in the bank. The sugar industry is paying 80 to 90,000 crores a year to sugarcane farmers, and the system is moving well. I think maybe, adjustment takes a little time, but in the long term, farmers' security by ensuring an offtake of a reasonable price, which government is saying they will come out with, I think is a step forward.
Okay, CSC Sekar, can you explain to everyone watching why the farmers are so anxious? If all that the government has done is added an alternate mechanism for the farmer to sell his produce without taking away any of the existing options to sell in a government mandi, then why are farmers out in the cold, braving the wind chill and the pollution and raising their voice against these acts?
Rahul, that's a very nice question. Thanks for having me on this show. But if you look at agriculture in India, it's very heterogeneous. It's not the same in Punjab as it is in Bihar or in Andhra. So the farmers' concerns are mainly confined to some of the states like Punjab and Haryana, and they have legitimate concerns. Why? Let me tell you. Explain. In Punjab, over the years, if you see, and also if you see in the last 2-3 years, 88% of the paddy has been picked up by the public procurement agencies. And nearly 70% of wheat has been procured by the public public procurement. When you compare the same with other major states, suppose other major states, paddy producing states like Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Odisha, or any other state, if you put together, there the paddy procurement is less than 44%. That is less than half of what is being procured in Punjab and Haryana. In the same way, in wheat it is even lower. In the major states other than Punjab and Haryana, which is Madhya Pradesh and UP, if you see the last 3 years procurement figures, the procurement out of the ratio of the production procured in these states is less than a quarter, less than 25%. Whereas in Punjab and Haryana, it is nearly 70%. So the Punjab and Haryana farmers, for Punjab and Haryana farmers, the procurement MSP system is the lifeline. So they have a legitimate concern. Any disruption to this kind of this MSP procurement system, real or perceived, is going to cause a major upheaval. So we have to understand those concerns. As Professor Gulati rightly said, these are our farmers. They have been in the forefront in providing the food security to the country. So government has to go that extra mile to convince them clause by clause. Now, let me just take one more minute. The major concerns the farmers have are about the continuance of MSP procurement system, one. Number two, that their land may be taken over by these corporates. Now, let us see what is the merit in these fears. The farmers are rightly concerned, as I said, because it is their lifeline. They are very worried. But more than the farmers, it is the government which needs this system to continue, because government is obligated under PDS and the NFSA to give the benefit of public distribution system to 80 crore beneficiaries and 8 crore migrants this year. So that translates into the government has been procuring nearly 40% of paddy and 32% of
But even current government procurement is more than India's stocks requirement. I was reading in the latest edition of India Today magazine that we're procuring 40% more stock of food grains than we actually need, which logically speaking should be ended. But if you end it, it means 40% of the grain that was produced will no longer be produced, and there'll be farmers who will be upset with that. So there is good economics, and then there is the interest of the farmers, who are an important political vote bank for every national government to take care of. For a perspective of the farmers, we've heard from the protesting farmers, but from for a different perspective, I want to introduce two special guests. P. Chengal Reddy is the chief advisor for the consortium of the Indian Farmers Association. He helped set up the Apex Professional Farmers Organization, works across 15 states. Vilas Vishnu Shinde is the founder and chairman of Shayadri Farms. Shayadri Farms was set up in 2010. They have 8,000 farmers as members at the least. They trade in fruits and vegetables and mostly export the commodities. The firm has a turnover of 150 crores. So Vishnu, Vilas Shinde, to you first. You've seen the protests of the farmers from Punjab and Haryana. You're in a different kind of space when it comes to agriculture, but what do you make of the protests of these farmers from Punjab, Haryana? How legitimate are their concerns, and how are you viewing the current agitation that we're seeing?
I think the situation with every crop farmer is different, and also the state-wise situation is different. We know that Punjab and Haryana farmers, they are making all the agitations for the minimum support price, which they think that if there will be purchase out of APMC, they will not get APMC. That is actually their issue. But in other crops, particularly in Maharashtra or in southern states, the horticulture crops or the cotton or the soybean, most of the trade is already happening out of APMC. In Maharashtra, if you see, the major crop is cotton and soybean in Kharif. And in the trade side, cotton is almost 90% cotton is traded out of APMC. Soybean, almost 60% is happening out of APMC. Horticulture crops, all the crops which are grown in Maharashtra and in southern states, most of the crops are traded at the point of farm gate, and some crops are going APMC. All it depends upon the situation. I will just give the example of two crops in Nasik. In Nasik, we have two major crops, grapes and onion. Out of total onion production in Nasik, 98% onion trade is happening in APMC, And in grapes, almost 95 to 98% trade is happening on the field. It is not going in APMC. So the situation based decision is taken by the farmer, which way is beneficial for him. So I think definitely the competition to the APMC is always welcome step.
So,
And,
Chengal
if there is a
Reddy,
competition,
would you
definitely
concur with
more
what Vilas Shinde is saying? And do you think there is now enough evidence at hand to suggest that these protests are largely limited just to Punjab and Haryana? That if you see elsewhere, farmers may have concerns, but they're not agitated and anxious in the same way as farmers from Punjab and Haryana. So this is not a pan-India farmer protest, as it were. It's a protest that's restricted to the regions of Punjab and Haryana.
Yeah, this agitation has totally confused the farmers and also put farmers at a great disadvantage. See, because we were thinking initially that whatever Punjab problem is there, it's about MSP. Because this MSP problem is not there in Andhra, Telangana, rest of the states. Because our chief ministers are able to procure, and I don't know why this Punjab chief minister is not able to procure and solve their problem. Now, after this, recently after they came to Delhi and all that, they started asking for scrapping of all the acts, and then now it seems they are asking for other things like civil liberties, etc. The whole problem is these people in Delhi who are all agitating, they just don't seem to understand what is the real problem. As Mr. Vishnu said just now, 90% of our products have no MSP. Like for horticulture or any of these commercial crops, minor millets, pulses, oilseeds, none of them have any MSP. If so, therefore, we also know that in all these crops, our biggest problem is wastage, low productivity, there is no technology, there is no long-term export. These are all there for the last 20 years. Sarat Joshi started, and 2006, Dr. Swaminathan said it. And of course, now, whatever reason it is, now finally it has come. We were all elated. We were all very happy. And I went to the extent of telling all my friends that in 1947, we farmers got independence. And in 2020, Mr. Modi gave us liberty. We are all liberated today.
Okay, so you're feeling that you've been liberated, but Uday Kotak, it throws up that one concern about how do you...
Look.
Okay, go on.
No, please understand. Please understand. The biggest draconian problem was Essential Commodities Act. I can't take it 5 kilos away from my home. And then every department has a control over me, and there is no export policy. Every day there is an export-import policy. The government of India and state governments have absolutely no coordination. It's a mess. We are now liberated. Only from our misfortune is, I don't know what these friends of mine from Punjab and Delhi and other political parties, see, it's a shame that some of these political parties, I don't want to name them, they were sitting on Swaminathan report for 10 years, and today they go and say, raise all sorts of questions. It is ridiculous. See, we are behind 30 years. 1990, the industry and service sector were liberated, and today they have all become globally competitive. Who the heck said that we are incompetent? We farmers are capable as much as any of our friends in engineers, doctors, or industry, service sector. Our boys go to America and become CEOs, and our soldiers go and fight China. Who the heck said that we farmers are incapable? What bloody nonsense. We want technologies, we want investments, we want to be liberated, and that's what today has happened, liberated.
Okay. So, Uday Kotak, this brings out the problem of how do you introduce and push through and generate acceptance for reform in India. The reality about the growing of paddy and wheat in Punjab, especially paddy, is that Punjab is now grossly water deficient. Water tables are plunging 0.74 meters, just about 3/4 of a meter every single year. And when we're exporting basmati rice from a water deficit state like Punjab, we're virtually exporting precious Indian water at a time when the next set of wars will be fought over water. But from the perspective of the farmer, that is his minimum income guarantee, that if he produces wheat and paddy, he'll be assured when he goes to a mandi, he gets an assured income. How do you deal with this challenge? This is indeed good for the country in a larger context, for the ecology as well over a period of time, but it may impact the farmer when his produce comes out the next time.
Rahul, the nature of incentives determines behavior, and changing incentives can happen gradually and cannot happen in a hurry. And therefore, at this stage, I think we need to ensure that the government has already given comfort that there's nothing has changed with reference to MSP. It was as it was, and nothing will change, at least for now. That is what has been clearly explained. Over time, we must make sure that incentives are aligned with what is the right goals for India, not only economically, but also from a point of view of sustainability. And therefore, good financial planning includes both short-term goals and long-term development goals. And I completely, therefore, agree with some of the points on this. We should be clear, is this a problem of some specific areas, or is it a national farmer issue? From what I hear and from my more learned colleagues, economists and farmers, this seems to be by a more sectoral issue rather than a national farmers issue. And we need to ensure, therefore, that we don't generalize the issue and then mix it with interests and politics. Let us stick to substance and do the right thing.
Dr. Gulati, can we find a way of localizing these reforms in a way that you give state governments the option of not introducing the reform in Punjab and Haryana? If farmers in Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, West Bengal, Bihar, Maharashtra are not protesting, can we push ahead with the reforms where it's possible and say, okay, this is for your advantage, but if you don't understand it, you will suffer over a longer period of time, and if we can't explain it to you, then so be it. Is there a mechanism that can be developed to ensure that?
I think the government has already offered that type of an option to Punjab because they were worried if the private sector comes and buys outside the mandi, that will weaken the mandi system, notwithstanding how high cost the mandi system is. But all said and done, the government has in a way offered that if you want to create a level playing field for the private sector and impose the same level of taxes, 8.5%, whatever, up to you. Now, other states can go ahead with zero taxes and they will take away.
No, but isn't that unfair, sir? Just on principle, from the perspective of the farmer, if there is a whole set of levies and taxes applicable when he goes to a sarkari mandi and no cess and tax when he sells to a private player, it will over a period of time see trade moving to the private players. It's only natural. Why then should there not be in law a built-in level playing field? Either you remove the cess and the tax on the sarkari mandis, or you impose some form of cess and tax on the private operations.
You know, if the sarkari mandi has a taxation rate of 2%, 3%, perhaps it is legitimate to impose that type of a level playing field for the private sector. But if the mandis are charging, earlier before GST, it was 14.5% in Punjab. Today it is 8.5% in Punjab. It's not the farmer who pays, it's the FCI paying. But if you force the private sector, the industry to pay that, they will be non-competitive from day one. These are the margins. So you need to create a very competitive system. This is like saying, oh, Indian Airlines has high costs and therefore no airline should be allowed to operate below that price line.
No, but Indian Airlines is cost, and a lot of these cesses and taxes are set by the government. The government can tell Indian Airlines, lower your taxes and bring them at parity with Indigo and Spice.
Exactly, exactly. So if FCI says we are not going to pay more than 3%, commission and cess or mandi fee, this is a cap on all states from where FCI is procuring. I think they will do a great justice to the country as a whole. But it will lead to a big loss to Punjab and Haryana, which have highest taxes imposed. And this is where you need to sit down with the state government, like the GST reform, that, okay, what are your losses? Can we do something over a period of time so that you don't have a big shock right away? So that type of compromise formula has to be worked out. The question is that these taxes have been too high and they were being paid from the FCI, but private sector cannot survive on those.
Ajay Shriram, this is the ultimate governance conundrum. What is good economics is not necessarily good politics. How do you deal with the very real fear of the governments of Punjab and Haryana that their revenue at a time when already GST revenues are under stretch will go for a toss if cesses are reduced or taxes at these government mandis are reduced. So how do you reconcile what's good economics with what may make sense in a political context?
You know, I think to continue with what Ashok is saying, I think it has to be a collaborative effort of the center, the state government, the farmers, and the artiyas and middlemen involved, because everyone is getting impacted. So you have to get them all into the loop. It can't change overnight because there is an income stream and the amounts are running into thousands of crores. So it's not small money. This will take a little time, but I think the only way out is two. One, you have to get into a continuous dialogue and find ways out. I feel like Mr. Arun Jaitley set up the GST Council. I think the government should set up the Agriculture Council involving all the states on one body which meets frequently to get some unanimity and some collaborative working, which is benefiting the farmer. I think that's one thing which is required.
No, but the big difference between what you're suggesting and what has happened, CSE Sekhar, is that this reform was pushed through first with the GST councils and the manner in which the GST bills were drafted. There was multiple levels and layers of consultation with the state governments before the bill was brought to Parliament. This time round, it was pushed in the middle of a pandemic, first through an ordinance, and within 5 months, it got assent from the president and became law. Do you think there was need for greater consultation? The government says there were multiple rounds of consultation, but should that have been much more, far more layered over a longer period of time than what we saw, CSE Sekhar?
I couldn't agree with you more on that, Rahul. Because if you look at the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Agriculture, in its report as recently as December 2019, they have very clearly observed when discussing this particular aspect of marketing. They said a committee of agriculture ministers of all the states be formed, and this issue should be thrashed out in that committee. Unfortunately, the government seemed to be in a hurry for whatever reason, and they chose the ordinance route. They not only did not form that committee, but they chose the ordinance route, and they actually, even at a later stage, when it was actually brought before the parliament, they should have referred it to a select committee or a standing committee to thrash out certain clauses, because there are certain very problematic clauses there, in the sense that the farmers have this fear of the level playing field between small farmers vis-a-vis the large private players, which is a very legitimate concern to me, because there has to be a regulatory mechanism. Privatization without regulation has not worked anywhere, not in the US, not in India, because we have TRI, we have CER.
Chengal Reddy wants to come in on this. The need to set up regulatory mechanisms to prevent the misuse, to prevent rampant capitalism running havoc, so that the farmer interest over a period of time are also protected while these reforms go through. Is that fair criticism from CSE Sekhar?
Absolutely, I don't agree with him. You see, what you must understand, how were reforms brought in 1990 by Manmohan Singh and Narasimha Rao? Were there any consultations? See, there was sudden development. A government as a responsible institution, they did develop, they brought in reforms. And look what is happening in the reforms in the last 30 years. You went on going a number of changes. Now, my question to my friends is, what is there to discuss? If you don't know, there's a different issue. You are forgetting fundamentally in the last 30 years, whatever reforms or advantages you industry and service sector enjoyed, we were not given. Only unfortunately, we were not able to represent and highlight because we don't have an organized body. Our farmers are all politicalized. And look, what is this to be discussed with Dr. Swaminathan earlier 10 years back, Saraj Jodi? We have filed a case in Supreme Court for implementation of Swaminathan report. Now, these discussions are going on. What about the farmers? What is there to discuss with farmers? Do you think these people sitting under these leftist, rightist and political people, look at the mess these people, political people have done other day. They go to all the way to the President of India complaining. It's a shame. I mean, they are humiliating. I mean, they are causing a lot of problems to the farmers. It's all political. This is rubbish. See, these reforms are brought. If there are any changes, modifications have to be done, we'll do it over a period of 1, 2, 3, 4 years. It's not a overtime. No. See, look, this is totally, people don't understand that we've suffered because of negligence, ignorance, and bypassing of reforms for us to farmers in the last 30 years. And finally, they have come, and all sorts of discussions are going on left, right, center. What is this? See, we want reforms. When you got advantages, how is that we don't have advantages?
Ashok Gulati, in your sense, how much of the reforms that we are seeing are genuine farmer anxieties playing themselves out, and how much is political machinations by the opposition, which is looking for an opportunity to pin the government down?
Well, Mr. Changal Reddy said, and he named Sharad Joshi. I had the pleasure of interacting with him since 1986. And one thing he said, this is our fundamental right to have freedom to sell to anybody we want inside the country or outside the country. That's it. I think this reform is inching towards that, not fully, because still export controls can be imposed. In fact, he wanted complete freedom to sell to anybody. And he said, like any citizen has a birthright, freedom, right, this is what it is. So I'm amazed that now many of those are opposing who had been asking for these reforms for 30 years. And I'm more on the side of Mr. Changal Reddy that, whether it is politics or hypocrisy of once you are in the opposition, you say something else, and once you are in the government. This is very, very unfortunate, because I feel the bottom line for the farmer is that he must have the freedom to sell his produce to anybody he likes.
Okay, Sanjeev Puri, let's spend a moment dealing with contract farming. The idea that you can pool land parcels, which are becoming smaller with every passing generation, to a point where they become unviable, and combine it as a cooperative or as a group of individuals or as a village or as a community, in whatever way you decide to bring together your land, and then possibly sell to a private agency, sounds like an idea which can help farmers. But there are farmers who are concerned. You've seen some of this some of this land parceling play itself out. What have been your experiences, and how would you assuage the concerns being raised by the farmers? Sanjeev Puri.
See, first of all, when you are aggregating land, farmers themselves can do it and form an FPO. They can form a cooperative, and they can negotiate with corporates. Now, contract farming, let's remember, it's not new. It's been happening where there is reciprocity of interest, where a needs certain attribute-specific produce, and a producer finds it worthwhile to produce it. People do enter into contracts. And it has been there across, we do it across potato. There are many who do it around onion, tomatoes, and there are so many examples. And to my experience, the retention rate in this contract farming has been pretty high, because always there is a choice to exit. But that exit is not happening. Retention rate is fairly high.
No, but the concern of the farmers, Mr. Puri, seems to be that corporates will snatch the land. That if they enter into a contract and they can't keep their part of the bargain, then corporates will usurp the land, and instead of being farm owners, they'll become laborers on what used to be their land.
No, this has already been sufficiently clarified, and it's embedded. It's not allowed. It's not allowed as per the regulation. So it's only an apprehension. And I think, one suggestion I would make, Rahul, to you and to your colleagues, all these reforms that are there, in some fashion or the other, much of it has been tested across multiple crops, different types of crops. So maybe you would like to go there and assess for yourself on the ground situation and share with the viewers and your larger viewers on what is the success that has been achieved through it. There are many crops in which these tools have been used. And if you look at, this whole system of mandi and MSP, etc., it's largely confined to cereals. Now, a farmer income, when somebody moves from cereals to horticulture, multiplies 2 to 3 times. And all that has happened through certain mechanisms like what, Syadri Farms has done. It's a brilliant example. There are examples of contract farming where people have moved from cereals to potatoes or tomatoes. And then there are, FPOs have been formed. So there are many such great examples. Now, what this regulation does, it makes it easier for these methods to be adopted and do not require an ease of doing, and getting into these kind of arrangements becomes much easier. So hopefully they will scale up. Plus the incentives have got aligned to make this happen. So it's a very potent mixture. And I think the apprehensions are really to be resolved through our own experience in the past. And my sense is that all the experience that we have had is only positive and reinforces that the reforms are very
No, but
much
Uday Kotak, the
the right
reality at
things to
this
do.
moment is there are perverse incentives at play. The fact that there is as much production of wheat and paddy in Punjab and Haryana is because over a period of decades we've incentivized, and there's a lot of emotion attached. When you speak to these farmers, they say, you know, India used to die of hunger. We ensured that Bharat mein khana hai, and you've got food to eat. There's food on the plate because of us. So you've created a set of incentives. How do you reverse those incentives? The apple cart is being upset at this moment. How do you reverse those incentives and then at the same time deal with this blowback?
Rahul, I believe in two fundamental points. If you are driving a car, please look at the windshield in front of you and be careful of driving in the front, looking at the rear view mirror all the time. And therefore, my view for India, and whether it's farming or any other sector, is let us look at the windshield in front of us, not the rear view mirror all the time. That's point number one. Point number two, giving the example of manufacturing. When we saw the reform of Indian manufacturing begin with the Manmohan Singh budget in 1991, I still remember many industries and businesses which were used to license Raj were very upset. And in fact, a famous Bombay Club talk was also in the air, as you may recollect. But finally, there were many industrial players and businessmen who saw that as an opportunity for a great future. And by early 2000s, Indian business and industry was able to compete with the best in the world. And in those days, in the 90s, people were saying, oh, we are opening up, foreigners will take away everything. It did not happen. It made Indian industry stronger. Therefore, if farm reform is the need of the hour, then on the merits of it, driving the car in the front and not looking at the rear view mirror, and thinking about this reform as an opportunity for increase of farm incomes should be the basis for India's future agenda.
Ajay Shriram, how many similarities do you see and how many dissimilarities are there? Because yes, the Bombay Club was very rattled, and in the end, a lot of those fears didn't play out the way that they imagined, but they also had more money and more sustaining power, much more than the typical Indian farmer. So how much of a similarity is there to the early 90s, and in what ways is this a dissimilar situation?
Rahul,
I think it's
a lot of the Indian industry went broke in 1997 to 2000 because of the Asian crisis. So Indian industry had a problem, but it geared itself up. And by the 2000s, between 2000 and 2006, we saw a strong resurgence of Indian industry after the pain. Therefore, I do believe that appropriate reform with hand-holding by government and looking at the windshield and front, not the rear view mirror, is the way forward for India in every sector, including agriculture.
Ajay Shriram.
Yeah, I'll just add that, you know, ultimately, if you see worldwide, every developed country gives support to farmers. It's an understood fact, and we are doing it, and we should continue doing it. I think we have to bring about a mindset change because of the issues involved in Punjab and Haryana. The biggest issue, as you mentioned earlier itself, was the issue of water. But I think by bringing them onto the platform that, look, we will support you, the government through the JAM Trinity, today they can give direct benefit transfer to people across the board. Do a study, ensure that some transfer happens, because ultimately this is one set of people. But a large number of farmers, they are only getting 25 to 30% of what the consumer pays. We have to take everyone with us. We can't look at only one set of people. We are 14 crore farming families in the country. We have to work with everyone. So we have to bring a change. I think status quo ante is not the solution. We have to look, as Uday rightly, look forward, and there are options and opportunities to take it up sectoral-wise, segment-wise, crop-wise. One can look at it in a much more detailed manner and find solutions. Sugar industry has done a great job. It's worked well for the last 30, 40 years. Many people who got into contract farming have actually got long-term contracts, and the laws are very clear. You cannot cheat the farmer. Let's be honest. I mean, politically, it can't stand. I mean, no government, whether state or center, will accept any corporate cheating the farmer, which is fair. So there are enough opportunities.
Okay,
and
so
enough
Vilas
laws
Shinde,
to
respond to
protect
that, because you work across farmers. How do you respond to this concern that many of these small farmers have, that we are too small to stand up to the big corporates, that when they come, they can hammer our prices down, they have the leverage, they have the negotiating power. At least with the government, we have a minimum assured price. If we were to trade with the private dealers, we will not get the bare minimum required to survive. How do you answer and respond to these concerns?
I think 90% our farmers are in small and marginal farmers category. And all these farmers, I think they have only two ways. They need to organize in a big way and create the scale where they can create the efficiency and they can compete in the market, whether it is in the Indian market or in the global market. Or another way is to just leave the farming, because individually it's very difficult to compete in the market. So the negotiation power, how we can increase the for the small and marginal farmers, I think that is the only option. And the organized farming structures, whether it is in the form of a farmer producer company or in the form of cooperative or in the form of any corporate structure, that is the only way for these small and marginal farmers. I will just quote our own example with the Sayadri's 1200 farmers initiative. We have created a grape export firm which is now doing much better than any corporate company. So we are now leading grape exporter from the country, and we are working with all the major European retailers and also the other countries' major players with the strong base, because we created our own strength where we can have our efficiency and also the base quality productivity with which we can compete in the global market.
No, so but what you're saying is correct, and I completely get where you're coming from, Ashok. But I want to ask Ashok Gulati whether it's too radical a reform too soon. See, what Vilas Shinde is essentially saying is that if you're small and marginal as a farmer, you cannot compete. You will need to collaborate, come together possibly as a cooperative or as a group, and then you'll have some negotiating power. That's basics. But the moment you say that, it upends how that farmer's been functioning so far. It changes his way of life. And is he prepared for it? Is he willing for it? Do you have his buy-in? Have those concerns been adequately answered?
Yes, this corporates versus smallholders. Let's take the case of Punjab, because that's at the center of the debate. You know, there was a saying that there are more tractors in Punjab than perhaps even dogs in Punjab. And the tractor industry is all corporatized, 4 players. You know, Mahindra alone controls 40% of the market share, right? And Tafe and Sonalika and if you put John Deere, you will have 85% of the market within these 4 players. Now, are they doing the greatest service to farming of India, or are they exploiting farmers of India? Ask the Punjab farmer, can he do without tractors today? I would salute these corporates from that sense, that how effectively and efficiently they have made our agriculture. Another thing, look at China. China's holding size is smaller than ours. Our average holding size is 1.08. China is today at 0.66 or maximum 0.7 hectare. Their cropped area is less than ours, and they produce 3 times more than ours. Agriculture output, 3 times more. So this is what Uday was saying. This land is capable of producing 3 times more. And for that, you need to put them together. In China, you're talking of land lease and corporates will take over. China has allowed 30 years land lease. Farmers can give it even to corporates. I'm not suggesting that to do it here right away. But the very freedom to do things the way you like and get the best technologies in the world, and they have shifted en masse towards high-value agriculture. You look at the wonders they have done. I think if we have to compete in the world, we have to look at the successful examples of smallholders. Smallholders have done wonders in the world. The very fact that, you know, you are the largest producer of milk in the world, and this is all by the smallholders, 187 million tons that you are producing, and US is number 2 at 100. So it's all done by the smallholders. Nestle's is operating, Amul is operating, Hudson is operating. These are all corporates of different types. Let there be competition. Let the smallholders have access to best technologies and access to best markets. The dream of Sharad Joshi needs to be fulfilled. He must be smiling from the heaven. What is happening? You know, when the government is ready to fulfill his dream, these very farmers are agitated. It's something surprising.
CSC Sekhar, what do you see happen next?
You know,
this battle of attrition between the farmers and the government, currently a question of who blinks first, the government unwilling to scrap these 3 laws, the farmers unwilling to relent. They're talking about intensifying the agitation. Where do you see things go from here, Mr. Sekhar?
As of now, the things look quite bleak, but I am optimistic for the simple reason that government has taken the right stand as of now, because as many panelists have said, the reforms are actually in the right direction. The intent and content of the bills appear largely okay to me. And because only 6% of the farmers are getting the MSP benefit, the rest of the 94 farmers will definitely have many positive points in these laws to look forward to. So I think a repeal of laws is perhaps not advisable. So I think the government is making all the efforts to reach out to these farmers. And one of the things that you pointed out, Rahul, very rightly, that the concerns of small and marginal farmers, how can they be addressed? My point to that is, as one of the panelists said, is to now the time has come for us to switch from this price-based support to an income-based support. Price is a very weak instrument, because when you give a support price, then farmer will produce that, and what will you do with that produce if there is no demand in the market, either domestic or export? So you'll be ending up with huge stocks. So the point is, the price can never be a good instrument for transferring income. So the best thing is to actually give cash or direct income transfers to these small farmers. And it is not actually, we are doing some work at Institute of Economic Growth, and we actually see that the direct income transfers will translate into much smaller quantum of assistance overall.
But these are also very radical ideas. The worst case scenario, Uday Kotak, is for farmers to demand direct income transfer and yet for MSP to continue. Because we had some guests who were from the farming sector, they wanted both, and that's where the politics come into play. There's such strong vote banks and political interests at play that how do you do what is economically right? Mr. Sekhar wants to make a quick point before I go across to Uday Kotak.
Yeah, just quick. Yeah, just one point. Actually, the MSP procurement system is crucial for these states, Punjab and Haryana. So, and also government needs it, as I said, and PDS, even if they have huge stocks right now, if they liquidate the stocks, they'll need to procure from some of these states, maybe. So I think the system can continue in these states for some time, but rest of the farmers, wherever they are, actually, even while negotiating with these private traders in the short term, they may be given this direct benefits. Now they are doing Kisan in any case, PM Kisan. But according to our estimates, the quantum of assistance is very low, around 6,000 rupees per annum. I think it should be, at least our estimate suggested that it is 2.5 times that needs to be increased to. So then the farmer can actually...
No, but that is an ask at a time, Mr. Uday Kotak, when in any case the government is struggling to find revenue for infrastructure, for the kind of money that will be required in public projects to help the Indian economy bounce back. Final words, Mr. Uday Kotak.
No, my final words on this are that farm reforms time has come. If it means that in the short run, we need to support and handle the farmer, every Indian will support it irrespective of which segment he or she is from. Having said that, I would look at the whole financing of India's future growth as a medium-term project. And therefore, agriculture, defense, infrastructure, healthcare, and sustainability. And interestingly, sustainability is something, as you rightly said, is linked to agriculture as well. And we need to think about medium-term solutions. Structural change is always tough to do in the short run, but we have to think about the medium to long run, because each of us as Indians are living off the borrowing of the future generation. We owe it to the future generation that we do the right things now, whether it is climate change, whether it is infrastructure, whether it is agriculture. We owe it to them, and that's the commitment we must make well beyond vested interests and private politics.
So we've had a very high quality conversation, different perspectives, but sharp insights into how this farm law is being perceived, and more importantly, ways forward given the current deadlock between these pockets of agitation in Punjab and Haryana and what we are seeing play out in the streets around the national capital. I want to thank Sanjeev Puri from ITC, Ajay Shriram from the DCM Group, Chengal Reddy, CSC Sekhar, Vilas Vishnu Shinde from Shayadri Farms, Dr. Ashok Gulati, and finally Uday Kotak for taking out time for this CII India Today roundtable on the agricultural reforms. The government so far holding firm, saying that there will be no scrapping, but suggesting that there is scope for accommodation and a willingness to make changes to assuage the concerns of the Indian farmer. We will track very closely where this movement goes from here. I want to thank you for joining us, and I want to thank you, most importantly, our viewer, for taking out the time and watching this broadcast. For your time and your trust, a big thank you.
Beyond the doses of lively gossips and paparazzi, he has left behind obsession and made room for open expression.
Ranbir Singh or Ranbir Kapoor?
You're asking me whether me or Ranbir.
Can you do the original Tamma Tamma? Because I love that track.
Dusting off the stardust from the stars and bringing out everything that makes them human.
You are probably the only guy who's never done a kissing scene on screen.
No, I'm not comfortable with them at all.
Join Sushant Mehta in the club, only on India Today TV.
For the latest news and updates, keep watching India Today. And remember to mask on before you move on. Don't forget.
Keep watching India Today. And just a reminder, mask on before you move on.
Sindhu border is the epicenter of farmers' agitation. This is Ashutosh Mishra reporting at Ground Zero, Sindhu border for India Today.
This very important highway which connects Bangalore to Hyderabad, it is completely blocked near Mehboob Nagar district. With camera person Damodar, it's Ashish for India Today.
In Barabanki with cameraman Sanjay Singh, Abhishek Mishra for India Today.
Common man is feeling the pinch of the shutdown. Manjeet Sehgal in Chandigarh for India Today.
There is some kind of support for the farmers' agitation, but that is not visible on the ground as far as Bhopal is concerned. With Vijay Irshad Khan in Bhopal, Hemant Sharma for India Today.
Grounded in journalism, on the ground reporting, only on India Today TV.
For more news and updates, log on to indiatoday.in and download the India Today app now.
This is Nolan Pinto along with camera person Madhu Warp reporting at Mysore Bank Circle, where farmers along with other organizations are currently protesting.
There are protests across the streets and of course issues being raised one after the other. With camera person Tabaswari, this is Manogya Loiwal in Kolkata for India Today.
Reporting from the Dak Bungalow roundabout in Patna, this is Rohit Singh for India Today.
With camera person Daniel from Chennai, this is Akshana for India Today.
Grounded in journalism, on the ground reporting, only on India Today TV.
Remember, do mask on before you move on. Don't forget.
A mask for a new beginning. A mask for keeping us safe. A mask for innocent smiles. A mask for the toughest battle. A mask for the future ahead. A mask for capturing new hope. A mask for delivering happiness. A mask for you.
Keep watching India Today and remember, do mask on before you move on.